This is After the Fire, a series about history after the events. Each season follows the long relationship between two worlds. Most of what we know about Egypt and Ethiopia comes from what was written down, but most of what shaped their relationship never was. Between these two ancient worlds, history is filled with silences, missing letters, lost archives, messages that were spoken, carried, remembered, and then forgotten. What survives is uneven. What matters is often implied. This is a story told through absence. If this speaks to you, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and tell us what you think. Chapter 1. Archives that were never meant to last. Egypt left behind an obsession with record keeping. Inscriptions carved into stone, papyri stored in temples, royal annals carefully listing campaigns and offerings. Egyptian history speaks loudly because it was designed to endure. What we hear today is what power wanted remembered. Ethiopia preserved history differently. For much of its early past, memory was carried orally, through genealogies, ritual, and story. Writing existed, but it did not dominate public life in the same way. Records were kept on perishable materials, in monasteries, or within communities whose histories were never meant to be universal. This imbalance shapes everything we think we know. When Egypt writes about the South, it often does so selectively, naming enemies, exaggerating victories, ignoring long periods of coexistence. When Ethiopian traditions speak of the North, they do so symbolically, weaving history into lineage and faith rather than chronology. What looks like absence is often a different way of remembering. Chapter 2. Treaties, Messengers, and Lost Voices. Some of the most important connections between Egypt and Ethiopia passed through intermediaries who left little trace. Diplomatic envoys travelled slowly along the Nile and across deserts. Religious messages moved between Alexandria and the Ethiopian highlands. Merchants carried news alongside goods. Most of their words were never recorded. Even formal agreements often survive only in fragments. The Bakut Treaty between Muslim Egypt and Christian Nubia, for example, is known not from a single preserved document, but from later references and legal traditions. We know it existed because it shaped behaviour for centuries, not because the original text survived intact. Letters were sent, instructions were given, negotiations occurred. What remains are outcomes, not conversations. This forces us to read history sideways, to infer intent from practice and communication from continuity. Chapter 3. Silence as historical evidence. The absence of records is not a failure of history. It is part of its structure. Between Egypt and Ethiopia, long periods of peace leave fewer traces than moments of conflict. Routine exchange produces fewer monuments than conquest. Stable relationships are quieter than dramatic breaks. This is why archaeology, linguistics, and ritual matter so much here. Coins found far from their origin, shared religious calendars, similar architectural forms appearing without explanation. These are letters never sent or never preserved. They tell us that contact was frequent enough to normalize difference, but not always intense enough to demand inscription. They suggest a relationship that functioned without constant declaration. After the fire of empire, silence becomes louder. What survives is not the voice of rulers, but the echo of habits. Between Egypt and Ethiopia, history often speaks most clearly where writing stops. Not every message needs a page. Some relationships were strong enough to exist without being fully recorded. Stay with us, like, subscribe, and tell us what you think.